Hello everybody, buenos dias, bonjour, good day, konnichiwa. My name's Glenn and here are my thoughts on how we might improve rugby's global calendar. There's always plenty of discussion about it among fans, players and administrators, and with COVID disrupting existing schedules, it's a good time to throw everything up in the air and see how things land. First up, a quick look at player participation. In the Americas region, there are 20 members and associates and around 350,000 registered players. Africa has a similar membership with 3 times the number of registered players. Europe has the largest membership and participation, while Asia and Oceania have a further million registered players. Overall, these 3.5 million are a third of the total players involved in the game, of which over a quarter are women. And worthy to note too is the USA's 1.5 million total players, the second biggest player population of anywhere. According to the same data, participation is growing. 2017 to 2018 shows a 5% increase in top 10 countries and 16% growth elsewhere, meaning nearly twice as many new players joined in countries outside the top 10. And this is true too for the women's game. Looking at participation rates in 2017 of 26%, by 2018 it was 28%, which seems small, though actually it means 3 out of every 5 new players are female. Also, some of the common topics discussed among administrators and on podcasts, blogs, or in the clubhouse. How to manage the different North and South seasons. Players choosing club contracts over country, or clubs not releasing their test players. The game's financial health, balancing salaries and development costs with TV money and ticket sales. Player-related issues like safety or games per year, recovery and rehab. And what about a World Club Championship in the calendar? And finally, spectator attendance. Here are recent total spectator figures for Six Nations and Rugby Championship and the top domestic tournaments in each hemisphere. With the 5 Northern Hemisphere tournaments pulling in almost 8.5 million spectators, while the top 5 in the Southern Hemisphere get under 3 million, straight away you see one reason why there's more money in the Northern Hemisphere. And the importance to the Sanzar countries of solving their disagreements over Super Rugby is huge, as there's so little else to fall back on. Now these data made me curious though, so I dug a little deeper, and this chart shows seasonal average attendances per game. For the 15 Six Nations matches per year, the crowds average 60 to 70,000 a game, while for the 12 Rugby Championship matches, or 6 in World Cup years, average crowds have declined in the last decade to 30 to 40,000. Now, lots of reasons for this, though I'm sure the alternating home or away Six Nations format retains some of the romance for fans every year, while playing the same 3 teams twice every season has perhaps bred some indifference in Rugby Championship fans. And the numbers back this up. In the Rugby Championship between 2012 and 2015, there were 8 60,000 to 80,000 crowds, but only 3 since then, and none above even 70,000. So the 95,000 crowd in Soweto's FNB Stadium in 2010 for Springboks All Blacks is long ago history. And interestingly, Argentina has picked up the slack as the only country where attendance is growing. For emerging nations, there's the Pacific Nations Cup for Fiji, Tonga, Samoa and invited guest nations, the Rugby Europe Championship for the next 6 sides in Europe, normally Georgia, Spain, Romania, Russia, etc. And then the Americas Six Nations for USA, Canada, Argentina's B team, plus Uruguay, Brazil and Chile. And attendances here are more erratic, or sometimes the data are missing, but generally they're growing, and Spain or Georgia can get 15 to 30,000 plus at home, and USA and Pacific nations 10,000 plus for the big games. So these tournaments are great platforms to grow the game outside Six Nations and Sanzar. A step below these, the European Cup is the flagship tournament in the north. This 40-team competition has remained pretty stable for 20 years at close to 70 games in each tier, and attendances have grown steadily. Compared with 2003, the 2019 Champions Cup average crowds were up 71% and challenge crowds up 105%. I've excluded 2020 due to COVID. Now, of course, this is the wealthiest rugby economy going, but I think a secret to its success is its inclusiveness. Every club in the French, English, top domestic leagues and every region from Ireland, Wales and Scotland, plus 2 franchises from Italy and 2 Continental Shield qualifiers all get a place. So pretty much 100% of rugby fans in each country are in the mix all the way through, as all top teams are involved. And even the second tier Challenge Cup remains relevant as fans can keep supporting their own team right up to the knockout stages. Contrast this with Super Rugby, which 20 years ago pulled in crowds more than twice as big as the European Cup. Recent attendances are half that. The quality of rugby is still high, though continual expansions with new franchises have overreached a single division round-robin comp. Super 14 took 3.5 months and averaged over 2 million spectators a year. There were 2.7 million in 2012. Now, Super Rugby takes 5 months and pulls in just 1.5 million spectators in total. Now, including the Jaguares in 2016 was the right thing to do 4 years after Argentina joined the Rugby Championship, though it was just too early for the Sunwolves, as Japan didn't have the player base needed. Plus, the conference formats complicated qualifying and annoyed fans, and the extra travel was an issue for players. Finally, COVID stopped everything in March, since when it seems everybody wants to jump ship. But Super Rugby remains a fantastic concept. And this year, Super Rugby Aotearoa showed it has huge pulling power. And a new, simpler format can get it back on track in a couple of seasons without a Trans-Tasman Pacific split off or South Africa going north, where the Pro 16 might solve jet lag, but it's going to raise a bunch of other issues and risks. Finally, domestic leagues. Northern Hemisphere attendances have grown 16% over the last decade, and the top 6 sides in France and England all averaged over 15,000 a game in the last full season. In 2018, the Pro 12 added 2 South African teams and 13% more games, though actually only 10% more spectators, so average attendance per game slipped and did again in 2019. But excluding these 2 sides, the Pro 14 attendance trend actually matched top 14 in Premiership growth, and attendances at Leinster and even Ulster or Munster are similar to the top English and French sides. Now the thinking to put 4 new Super Rugby sides in is an enormous gamble, both for the Pro League and for South Africa Rugby Union. In the south, there's a contrast between South Africa, where traditionally big Currie Cup crowds are massively down since 2014, and New Zealand and Australia, whose smaller domestic crowds are growing slowly. Currie Cup attendances have dropped off a cliff, while the format changed 5 times in 8 years, switching from an 8-team double round robin into a 6-team double round robin, then an 8-team X and Y formats cross pools, then a 9-team single round robin, back to a 7-team double round robin, and now again a single round robin with just 24 games a season in total, half that of the Mitre 10 Cup Premiership, which has had the same 12-round format since 2011. Now, I couldn't get Currie Cup data for 2018-19, so I don't know if crowds are growing again, but with just 3 home games a season per team, excluding semis or finals, versus 10 to 13 home games for the European clubs, excluding their finals, then chances to market South African rugby for the broadcast media and bring in cash from tickets, merchandise, food sales are just being missed every season. Now, I'll pull together some lists of the key international competitions here to give an overview of the number of them, that even this is not exhaustive. In North America, there's the Rugby Championship for the top 5 countries and Argentina's B team. In Europe, the Six Nations is the major competition, and in Africa, Oceania, the Rugby Championship, including Argentina. In Asia, there's the Tri Nations, while the Women's Super Series in 2019 included USA, Canada, England, France, and New Zealand. A level down, the next 4 sides in the Americas compete in a Rugby Challenge comp, the next 6 in Europe, the European Championship. In Africa, the Gold Cup was expanded in 2020 to 12 teams in an attempt to simplify it. There's the Pacific Nations Cup in Oceania and Asia Rugby Championship Division 1. And finally, the Women's Six Nations, Laurie O'Reilly Trophy and Can-Am Series. A further level down, the Caribbean countries compete for the Rugby Americas North Championship and Cup. The regular Sud-America Seniors B and C were not scheduled though. European Trophy and Conference 1 and 2 for North and South pulls in the next 16 sides for Europe. Africa's Silver and Bronze Cups were also not scheduled for 2020. The Oceania Cup is only competed every 2 years. Then Asia Division 2 and Division 3 and the Women's European, Africa and Asia tournaments round out the organised Test Match Championships. And at club level, I broke it into international club comps, fully professional domestic leagues, semi-pro or fully amateur competitions. Super Rugby runs from February to June, while European Cup matches are spread throughout the whole season. In America, the Major League Rugby plays from March to June, and the new SLAR in South America was scheduled this year before COVID killed its first season. In Europe, the top 14, Premiership and Pro 14 play around 28 to 30 games from August to June, while the Currie Cup, Mitre 10 and National Rugby Championship run between late July into October. Japan's top league runs July to Jan, and the Women's Premier 15s, Elite, Women's Premier League in USA run in the Northern Hemisphere winter, while SuperRugby and Farah Palmer Cup bookend the Southern Hemisphere winter. Amateur and semi-pro leagues run beneath these in all regions. Argentina's amateur game is phenomenally well supported, and the European leagues go deeper than any other region. South Africa has huge diversity of competitions, and there's New Zealand's Amateur Heartland Championships and their club comps, Australia's Shoot Shield, Queensland Premier, and the Pacific Islands club comps cover their remaining national amateur structures. There's a challenge level below the top league in Japan, and established competitive hierarchies in Hong Kong and South Korea, while the women's amateur club leagues largely mirror the men's. So a huge amount of rugby, international level and at representative level throughout the world. Putting these all together in a global calendar is complex. Looking at 2019 as an example for internationals, international clubs, professional domestic, amateur domestic and women's rugby, starting in the Northern Hemisphere, the season kicked off in Japan with the Top League Cup, followed by the Top League in August. France started in August and the Premiership and Pro 14 in September. European Cup kicked off a month late in November due to the World Cup and finished out in the beginning of May, before the season finished for the clubs in June. Major League Rugby runs in February to June, and then internationally the Six Nations and America's Rugby Championship in February-March, before the Asia Rugby Championship finishes their season in May and June. The Pacific Nations Cup included Japan and the USA in July-August, and the Rugby World Cups doubled for the July tournaments before the World Cup. In the Southern Hemisphere, Super Rugby kicks off their season running from February all the way till June, followed by the Currie Cup and the Mitre 10. Sanzar Rugby Championship normally runs with 3 pairs of weekends, but a shortened one for the World Cup last year, before the season finishes in Argentina with the amateur clubs finishing their National de Clubes in October-November. The women's had their Super Series in June-July, as well as November tests. And the under-20s had a championships and a trophy for the next 10 sides below in June and July. And then the season also has the sevens running in November-December all the way out until May, along with a number of tens tournaments that are growing in popularity. So an enormous amount of rugby throughout the season. Now, my thoughts about figuring out a solution to the global calendar are not rocket science, though. First of all, since the major test championships finance much of global rugby, we need best-in-class top-tier comps to showcase the best talent internationally and market the game at the elite end. It's the highest aspiration of players, and fortunately, unlike many other sports, clubs aren't more important than internationals, although some clubs certainly think so. For up-and-coming countries developing their game, championships need to be simple, affordable and practical for their national unions with the support of World Rugby, providing competitive matchups, not 50 to 100-point walkovers that are easy to get to without globetrotting and that have meaning and purpose in terms of World Rugby ranking points or World Cup qualification. The test tours should be scheduled on a rotational basis, linked to World Rugby rankings, and with obligations for the top 10 to play developing nations matches on every tour, while fitting into the available spaces in domestic schedules. And the flagship comps of the club and provincial game, European Cup, Super Rugby, etc., to be clearly differentiated from the regular season, a step up to international quality, with eye-catching skills and spectacular entertainment. Now, to summarise separate videos on each region's test calendar, for the Six Nations, a later start date allows for better weather and more enjoyable matches, and adding a playoff for promotion and relegation with the winner of the European Championship is well overdue. The arguments against Six Nations relegation are, it impacts development of the relegated nation, but really the objective here is to grow the game overall, not protect the elite, and more exposure of European Championship teams like Spain, Georgia, Russia, etc. will achieve that. The playoff match should be a home game for the Six Nations team, as it should be difficult to break in, just not impossible like today. Expanding the Rugby Championship to include Japan and evolving the Pacific Nations Cup into a second-tier rugby challenge is a huge opportunity to innovate and include the best teams outside Europe. A formalised second tier with regular high-profile matches in a defined tournament structure, not an ad hoc invitation one year but not the next scenario, will entice more players to play in it, and more spectators to watch it, and more broadcasters to invest in it. In the non-European, non-SANZAR countries, there is a clear need for simplification and coordination of the regional championships, fundamentally to provide more rugby but with less travel. By taking a look at the European Championship, which has the good fortune of the best geography and economy of rugby globally, some structural adjustments of other region championships will improve feasibilities and efficiencies of running them. And for the women's game, growing as healthily as it is, the opportunity to take this momentum and create a broader exposure and deeper penetration of female sports will possibly never be so good. It's a great opportunity to make the Super Series into an annual comp and support it with a challenge series for the next 5 sides until the game develops into more regional women's championships. Down to the club level, to summarise those videos, in Europe, the European Champions and Challenge Cups are the pinnacle of the club game, though as the schedule is blended into the domestic season, the European Cup matches don't always stand out clearly. Rescheduling this into the season opening tournament allows the Northern Hemisphere club game to start the year off with a bang. High-profile matches in August and September between the clubs qualifying from the last season just 3 months before, kicking off the new season against the best clubs from across Europe. A small format adjustment can reduce it by a week and still keep in all 40 teams with equal home and away matches to reduce congestion. Now, it's no secret the Super Rugby fire's burned a little low lately, though for me it's still the best thing about Southern Hemisphere rugby and just needs stoking up again. The single country formats are ideal for now, and it's a good time to put a 3 to 5 year roadmap in place to fix it. The new structure I've created will shorten the competition and reduce player travel without losing the international element. Within 2 seasons, it can be back on track and showcase to the world the attacking flair of the Fijians and Argentinians, the tactical ingenuity of the Kiwis, the bruising physicality of the South Africans, and the fair dinkum of the Aussies, all in a competitive, high-quality 3-month tournament. Then, based on these 2 flagship comps, we have the icing on the cake, a World Club Championship, involving the top 4 teams from each tournament, seeded and matched up over 4 Saturdays, to find the ultimate champion of champions. Every 2 years, for the first time ever, the chance to truly claim the bragging rights of the best club in the world. And finally, a new competitive format based on cricket's IPL or Big Bash League, etc., to spread the game. A short, sharp, modular tournament able to be rolled out anywhere in the world and ideal for innovations and experimental law variation trials and designed for commercial viability. And lastly, the end-of-season tours need a makeover too. Players now have to travel at the end of the season, already exhausted after 40 weeks of playing and training and recovering, taking long-haul flights for away games in the middle of winter against players still fresh after only a few months of their season. So a freezing July night in Christchurch, or 3 degrees and sleet pouring down in November at Murrayfield. What about playing and watching in warm, sunny conditions, travelling in mid-season before fatigue is every player's daily reality, and enjoying a host hospitality in the best weather? Cardiff with good firm ground, Paris in the summer, or Buenos Aires or Sydney in the sunshine with the beaches close by. Playing a minimum of 2 tests, including warm-up test for squad rotation against a nearby developing country, and midweek run-outs versus clubs outside the major cities, taking the game to the fans and getting into the clubhouse afterwards and enjoying the social side of the game. The tours would form part of a 4-year cycle, years 1 and 3 running as described, and years 2 and 4 alternating with other key international fixtures, Lions Tours, World Club Championships, the Rugby World Cup, and using World Rugby rankings to plan tour itineraries a year in advance, the tours become more competitive, more meaningful, and easier to schedule. How does all of that fit together? Players and ex-players talk about ideally playing around 30 games a year with 2 months off season. Nobody's playing every game in a year though, so I've built up a 44-week season for domestic and internationals together with 8 weeks break. 2 weeks more than Northern Hemisphere top players get now, starting late August and wrapping up by end of June, and in the South, end of January to end of November, much the same as now. Then for the test windows, there's talk of aligning North and South into 1 test season from July to October. But every way I've looked at that, it just seems more compromised than clever, especially for the players, with 4 months of test matches and travel. Then fitting North and South domestic rugby around it means further juggling for clubs and spectators. Much better to accept North and South seasonalities and make the most of the natural spring and autumn season overlaps. Pushing 6 Nations and European Championships 1 month later into March and April, while the new 5 Nations Rugby Championship and Rugby Challenge run for 6 weeks in the South springtime. Here, each country plays 2 home, 2 away with 1 bye, and a break in the middle, so no one plays 4 weeks in a row. Asia's championships would follow the North timing, and South America the South. And the Americas Rugby Championship and Africa Cup cover both hemispheres, so it could alternate each 2 years, spring or autumn. Then switch the test tours, so inbound to Europe or North America in June, and inbound to Southern Hemisphere or Asia in November, 3 to 4 weeks max. The Under-20 Championship and Trophy and the Women's Super Series and New Challenge Series would run each May and June too, where they don't clash with either the Premier 15s or French Elite, or the Super W or Farah Palmer Cup. For the international club comps, a shorter Super Rugby can start mid-Feb and finish by mid-May, while the European Champions and Challenge Cups would start the Northern season. Both would finish 2 weeks before the away tours and be ideal preparation for team selections. In the South, Club Rugby starts March-April, though South Africa's Varsity Rugby and Gold Cup start 2 months earlier, though 4 months, April to July, allows domestic club leagues to complete their competitions by end of July, leaving a 3-month window to run Currie Cup, Mitre 10 Cup and National Rugby Championship, finishing by end of October as per now, before the incoming tours. While for Europe, the leagues would start right after the European Cup and finish at the end of May. 28 weeks allows the top 14 to complete a double round robin with semis and a final, with an extra weekend if they need to fit in their half-final playoffs, and the Premiership and the Pro 12 can finish league-only tournaments, leaving space for a new FA Cup-style 82-team British and Irish Cup. Premiership and Pro 12 clubs would join from the 4th round, and the quarters, semis and finals would replace the current Premiership and Pro 12 semis and finals on a much grander scale. Then, every 2 years, the World Club Championship would run, alternating in June in the Northern Hemisphere and then in November in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, there are 2 weeks in March and April used only for top 14, as well as 2 extra breaks, and in the years the World Club Championship runs in November, those 3 Northern Hemisphere League games can be rescheduled during the Six Nations to complete the season on time. Finally, Japan's top league starts midsummer as usual, with a 16-game regular season and semis and finals in December, with space in the calendar for a new Japanese Premier League in February-March. USA and Canada Major League Rugby is also in the same slot as now, again a 16-game regular season, with semis and final. So there you have it, a workable format for Test and Club Rugby to align locally and internationally. Now, of course, more detail is required, and I will shortly post videos for Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere Club Rugby, including a shorter European Cup and the new British and Irish Cup format, a roadmap to fix Super Rugby and thoughts on Pro 16, plus other inputs on Argentina, Japan and South Africa's domestic rugby, plus suggestions for simplifying and economizing the Test Championships in Asia, the Americas and Africa. I'd love your feedback. So, I invite you to watch my other videos, uploading shortly with more details on regional championships and domestic rugby. Please share your feedback. Thanks for watching. Finally, please know these are all my own ideas and not connected to any official rugby organisation.